hip. Thank you, Brandy and staff. You wonder why this chair is sitting up here all by itself. Customary with a lot of military organizations coming out of Vietnam. They have a chair that historically sits there empty during the meal for those that were lost, MIAs and POWs that are accounted for. So that's what that's there for. As you, those that were here last year remember, we came up with, Carol and I came up with the idea, someone approached us with the idea of giving $1,000 to be split between the Mural Society and the South Carolina Battleground Preservation Trust. And last year I went to Chris and Bob Slaughter. This year we once again decided maybe two people should have it. And one of them, first center our lives, probably the first or second symposium we were planning. We were at the Den Motel across the street from Giorgio's, and this guy came dancing in there and started telling us what we ought to do and what they, whoever they was, undefined at that time, could do for us. And I wasn't too far from being an active duty colonel, and this guy reminded me of some of my second lieutenants. And I think in so many words I told him that this was a fundraising exercise, not to pay somebody for consulting services. After we got that settled, we've had a good time since then. I think at that same symposium, there was a gentleman sitting there, and I had put what at the time I thought was all the engagements that Marion had taken part in there. And we were reading, he and someone else were reading down it, as I recall. And there was one engagement, and I don't know, it might have been Wadloo, but I don't really remember it, it doesn't matter, that neither of them could remember where it was, or maybe hadn't even heard of. So that didn't bother me any. I knew where I'd read about it, and we pressed on. Anyway, over the years, it's become evident that these guys are really serious, and they were serious at that time already, well into it, more than Carol and I. And they have led probably more than any two other people that I know of, pushing the Southern campaign of the American Revolution. And in case you don't have any idea of who they might be, one of them is our cheerleader, David Ruler, if you'll come up. And the other one is the leader of the 250th Commission, Charles Baxley. Let's get off the middle of the stage. I see most of you remember that we're no longer eating, so face masks are probably appropriate to put on. Yeah. No, we don't need that. David. Thank you. One more, I want. And now, without further ado, is there any other business? So let me ask you all. Hearing none, let me introduce Erick Nason. And I think most everybody has heard this young man left the military as a senior NCO. He now has a doctor's degree in military history. He is the leader of the 2nd South Carolina Regiment and some other, what is it, the combined military?
Just about.
Yeah.
Right now, can you hear my voice? I've been told sometimes I do not have a good outside voice and my inside voice. I am Ranger Captain Jacob Clark from the Independent Battalion of Rogers Rangers, which makes it funny, why is there a New York boy sitting down here in South Carolina? Well, a lot of people have seen this. It makes my heart see so well that people here are very interested in Francis Marion. They all want to talk about Francis Marion. How many of you know what he's like when he was younger? How did he become the swamp fox that you all well know? I'm here to tell you about it. I met him when he was a young lieutenant. For me, my war was over. I had been fighting for 5 steady years up north. Cleared Canada, cleared New York. I thought my war was over. Till a letter arrived to the Major Command, General Amherst. South Carolina needed help with their Indian problem. Most of the Rangers had disbanded. We were going to send one company of Stockbridge Mohegans down. Well, he needed to send an officer down to advise Colonel Grant on their next campaign. So guess who was selected over his peers to be on that expedition? So I came down in the winter of 1760. I arrived in the great seaside city of Charlestown. We're introduced to Colonel Grant, as well as Colonel Middleton, of whose regiment that I will be part of and in advising. Our mission was to stop the Cherokee invasions that kept on coming down from the upcountry. Now, they had tried the year before under Montgomery. They didn't do very well. In fact, they almost got massacred. Thus the reason why they needed help. They didn't have enough experience to fight the Cherokee. So they gave me 4 months to advise Colonel Middleton's regiment how to properly fight against the Cherokee before the spring campaign would begin. Well, the problem was a good majority of the Middleton's regiment has gone home. It's winter time. So I couldn't train the entire regiment. So we decided to pick one company to be the lead company, to be the scouts, to be their true rangers, because they told me that their rangers didn't do as well. Because they've heard of our reputation up north with Rogers, how efficient and effective we were in fighting. So they picked Captain Moultrie's company, because they considered Captain Moultrie to be a very professional soldier. So when I arrived at his company, there I met a Lieutenant Francis Marion. Now I've seen my fair share of good leaders. I mean, I was with Robert Rogers and Stark and Putnam, true leaders of men. And then you meet Marion. Folks, let's be perfectly honest. He doesn't have that physical character of what you would think a true leader of fighting men would be. I mean, he's only about yay tall. And he's bow-legged. And to be perfectly honest, lady, he is not what we call a looker. No. I mean, that nose. I mean, that's probably his most prominent feature I recall when I first met him was his nose. Well, what really drew my attention was just above his nose. His eyes. He had these eyes upon him that he was interested. He wanted to know. He was very dedicated and took very seriously his job, that he knew that we're getting ready to do this campaign. He was already a veteran. It wasn't his first campaign. He had already been fighting and joined with his brother Gabriel in another company. So he already had experience, but he was willing to learn. So as a good leader, I want to get to know my men. I want to get to know Moultrie. I wanted to know Marion. What's their background? Marion told me about his very short maritime career. How as a young lad of 15, he tried to go to sea. And on his first voyage, shipwrecked. Probably much why he never joined the South Carolina Navy. At least in my suspicion. He didn't like being stuck out there marooned. So as we began to train, he wanted to learn and know tactics. He wanted to learn, well, what's it like? Because this is what we're dealing with. We're dealing with South Carolina. We're going up country. How did you beat the Huron? How did you beat the Ottawa? Because we're going against the Cherokee. The Cherokee seem to be doing a pretty good job of this. So we taught them our Ranger tactics. I brought with me Roger's Rules of Ranging. And he studied. He learned. He adapted. We took these fine gentlemen and men from the woods, men from the fields, and we made them into a cohesive fighting unit. We drilled, and Marion was a stickler for the drill. If it wasn't done right, we'd stop and start over again. He didn't care what the weather condition was. He made sure his men were ready. And we were going to see that spring. And the campaign would begin. Probably one of the biggest things he learned was what does it mean to be a leader of men? Because we had Colonel Grant on one side, we had Colonel Middleton on the other side. No one can lead a fight when you got two dads arguing with each other. Doesn't work. Have to have one leader. We learned that mistake up in New York, where the regular British officers would have their plans, and then the provincials would have their plans, and the two never mixed. Well, it seemed to be the same problem we were having down here. Colonel Grant and Colonel Middleton did not get along. And every time we tried to have a command meeting to try to plan our next operation, these two started arguing about who had higher rank. They're both colonels. I mean, they're talking about date of rank. Well, I'm a provincial colonel. I'm a British colonel. How many wrong do you have? Marion watched this. Not to mention, with Middleton, we were very close trying to change the name because Middleton really didn't stick around much. He always had business to attend to. If it wasn't for Henry Lawrence, who was the executive or the second in command, the regiment probably would have starved. Because we're training, we're working, Middleton goes, oh wow, yes, gotta go down and check my plantations, see you in a little bit, and you take off. And then here's Lawrence trying to figure out where am I getting food for him? How do I feed my men? How do I keep it good? And Marion watched this. He saw that bickering didn't work. So when the spring arrived and the regiment was formed, the men were in their uniforms and their leather helmets. They're ready to march. And then our four regiments of British regulars with Colonel Grant, Middleton's regiment, the one company of Stockbridge Rangers arrived under Captain Allen and his Corps of Indians. I wouldn't call them much of a corps, about a company and a half, but it sounded great. And we sent the local militia. We started the march. And we made our way up through 96. Then we get up to Fort Prince George, right there on the edge of Cherokee territory. We held the Council of War to discuss how we're going to defeat the Cherokee. Now, the year before with Montgomery, he had marched into the Cherokee territory and went into the Exchequer Pass to go after the lords of the lower towns, Exchequer. And it was in that ravine that he was nearly annihilated. So Colonel Grant's plan was simple. He's going to follow the same route in. Yes, we said too. And Marion said that, and Moultrie said that, Lawrence said that. Like, wait a minute. You mean to tell us, and we were the lead regiment, by the way. It wasn't the British regulars. It was Middleton's regiment was leading. And leading Middleton's regiment was our company as the light infantry scouts. We're going to follow the same exact path that Montgomery took the year before and go through the same ravine that Montgomery went through. And I tried to explain to him that based on Rogers' rules of ranging, you never follow the same trail twice, especially if you get ambushed on it. Grant would not listen to any of us provincial officers. Don't worry, we have our steel bayonets and we'll meet the Cherokee head on. In a ravine? We're like, no. Still, orders were orders. We crossed the river and we entered the Cherokee lands. As we're moving through it, now this is about end of May, early June. We all know how comfortable the weather is here in South Carolina in June. At least it was early June. The day arrived that we were going to go into Exuy Pass. Marion with Moultrie, still a consummate professional, he checked on his men. He made sure that everyone had enough cartridges. Their muskets were working. They had enough food ready to go. That every man was prepared for anything that was going to happen that day. Myself personally, my stomach was telling me we're going to have a bad day. I had a bad feeling about this. Not to say I've been there, done that. Been there, done that. Again, I had no idea what it is with the British and marching into ravines. It happened to us in New York during our Bloody Morning Scout that as we're going out, we went into a ravine and, well, just like that, shot, bullets get shot right off you. We still were ordered to advance. So the runner came up, the army was told to advance, we were the lead company. So as we begin to advance, we're in this large, open cornfield. Chest high corn. It's June, so the corn's been growing for a while. Cherokee was raising their corn. I could tell eyes were upon us. You get that feeling that there's eyes upon you. You're being watched. It wasn't like we were trying to hide either. Now, I did give them some credit. They didn't come out with their fifes and drums playing loudly. They just advanced down the road in a tight column with their flags flying, while we are to the front moving through. And as we're going through the cornfields, we could see the ground start to lift away. We could see the ground also, the trail was going into the ravine. Moultrie stops the company. He's looking in, and he looks at the Lieutenant Marion. He looks to me for advice. He goes, this doesn't look like a good place to enter. And I said, nope, you're right. If I was going to ambush somebody, it's in here. We're channeled. We can't go nowhere. However, we were told to advance anyways. So into the ravine we go. The ground to our sides are lifting up. Trees are getting thick on our sides. We're still advancing in open order. Now Marion is controlling his men. Even though, again, he doesn't have the visage of a leader. The men followed him because they wanted to. Even we all knew, we all now got this feeling that this is going to be a bad place. They stayed with him. Then a runner comes up from the lead regiment, with the 1st Regiment of foot. They want us to clear the ravine, to make sure there is nothing hiding in there. So Moultrie splits the company. Marion is going to take the right side with half of the company. Moultrie is going to take the left. Captain Allen and the Corps of Indians will be in the center to protect us in case we do run into contact. So Marion gave the order. We opened up. We spread out. He used our ranger tactics. It did heart well. That they performed as admirably. That I even noted that Rogers himself would have been pleased with not just the men of this company, but the leaders. That Marion had the men spread out, stay in twos, use the cover. So it's not like we just walked straight ahead. We bobbed and we weaved with the trees as we started to come up. And we got closer. And then at that point, 7 Cherokee jump out, fire a quick shot at us, and everyone reacted. They ducked. And then the Cherokee take off running. Now the men got up, and Marion first said, "Halt! Stop! They're luring you into an ambush. Hold your ground." We reformed the line. And sure enough, just a little ways up on the hill, the same 7 Cherokee pop out again, take up pot shots at us. So then we organize ourselves, and we start to advance slowly in good order, but open, moving tree to tree. Then 1,000 Cherokee voices. Woo! The ambush was about to begin. It wasn't a good ambush. Some got a little trigger happy, and they started firing on our left-hand side. A couple fired, then a couple fired, and then the entire ridge opened in this gray smoke. We had just enough time to dive for cover because of that war cry when the ball started slamming down. At that point, we were in for a true fight. So each man took perfect aim while covered. Marion himself, I found to be a really good shot. Did not panic. He got behind a tree, he took up a good bead, he'd take his shot, come back and load, and yet still watch what his men were doing. Well, at that point, the balls were really starting to fly. It almost was fall because the leaves are coming down. You could hear the thud of the musket balls flying around, hitting all the trees, shredding the leaves all around us. Behind us, the lead elements of the 1st Regiment has come in. They're trying to form into line. All of a sudden, we hear everyone's favorite words. "Make ready!" And we all look behind us. And then we look above us, and there's the Cherokee. And then we heard, "Present!" Marion yells out, "Take cover!" Down we went, and they fired. Well, the same runner comes up, and they're telling us, "We need you to clear the ridge line so the rest of the army can come in." It's like, wait a minute. We're in the middle. And Marion points us out to Moultrie that we are caught in a crossfire. If we go anywhere up, if we're not going to be shot by the British, we're going to be shot by the Cherokee. Orders are orders. Marion said, "Okay." He took volunteers. 27 men said, "I'll go with you. I got nothing else better to do. I'm going with them as well." We charged uphill, moving as teams, as the Cherokee are firing Mudway, and the British are following over us. Luckily, they're shooting a little high. It wasn't too bad. But men are falling around us. We are taking casualties. And then once again, from the top of the hill, one vast volley from the Cherokee, and here they came. Tomahawks out, clubs, knives, all dressed in war paint. 1,000 men come rushing down the woods. We have about 20 left. So we all formed up. And it was interesting because the men naturally gravitated to Marion. And he stood there with his hands out and said, "Wait for it. Wait. Make your shots count." And here they come. I mean, they're coming down the hill, they're picking up speed, gravity's taking them. Marion is telling the men, "Hold your ground. Make the shots count because we may only have one volley." He waited until they're less than 10 yards away. And he gave the command of shoot. We let loose the volley, and it was like they crashed upon the rocks. Those in front of us fell. The rest of them ran past us. So at that point, all we could really do was fall back on each other, back to back in this little circle. We're now caught in this middle, this maelstrom fight between our Ellison and the Indian Corps, the British, all around us. Bullets are flying. At this point, we were so close. We went to the old tried and true. Up close and personal. We didn't have time to load our muskets. We didn't have time. All we could do was pull our knives and tomahawks and fight. But it was enough. It broke the Cherokee's spirit of fighting. Because the shooting got less and less. Now the British are advancing up. They're on the flanks. Allen's and the rest of the Stockbridge Indians are coming up. Moultrie has turned his men, and they're coming up. And they drove the Cherokee away. When it was over, there was only 7 of us still kind of standing. I mean, you can sort of see where the ball kind of creased. There's a nice little crease here. I had one hit my back. It kind of knocked the wind out of me. I got lucky on that one. I was very appreciative to be alive. But out of the 27 who had started, there's only 7 of us sort of still standing. The Cherokee went away. We were told that we had done our duty, and Moultrie's company could fall back and rest in the camp. So we fell back. We reorganized. The surgeon came through to treat our wounds and injuries. That was it. That was the last real fight of the campaign against the Cherokee. It was there at Cherokee Pass. It also seems strange, I mean, not to be superstitious, but it was also the same month 1 year prior that Montgomery had gotten beaten. We were only out by 2 weeks. But we prevailed in our fight. For the rest of the campaign, all that Grant did was burn everything. And we advised them that this isn't a good idea. I mean, if you're trying to make peace with the Cherokee, at least encourage them to stay home. Don't burn their homes. Don't burn the crops. He didn't listen. And Marion took note of this, that if you can't win the hearts and minds of the people around you, you will never win a war. And they never learned that lesson. But I'll save that tale for another day. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time. I can answer some questions if you have any. I know it's getting late. You guys all have wonderful stuff. If you have no questions for me,
Erick,
sir.
where did you get your information about this?
I've actually was reading about all different campaigns, especially with Middleton's regiment, and a lot of the men, especially with Lawrence and Moultrie and everything else, they talked about the campaign. Same with the expedition against, in the archives of the Anglo Cherokee War.
So there was someone from Rogers Rangers.
Oh yes. You will see when they talk about Middleton's regiment and the part of the Grant, they call them Mohawks and Mohicans. Well, the Stockbridge only come from one place, and that's the company of Rangers. And I also read Rogers' personal diary. He talks about how he had to select a group, and the only ones still, because the rest of the Rangers were going home, Stockbridge weren't really going to go home, so they're the ones sent. Well, who's best to fight against an Indian? Another Indian.
Erick, have you been to the review?
I have. That's what it was. Very, very familiar to ones I've seen before. Sergeant Beck.
Yes, sir. This may be a little bit off topic, but Robert Rogers, where did he go wrong when the Revolutionary War began?
Well, it was an interesting time between the wars. Now, Rogers was fighting so hard to get his no-kidding British commission. Now, once he got it, well, what are they going to do with him? So we just gained all this new French territory. As we talked about earlier today, out towards Illinois, Rogers was sent out to literally sign for all the French forts. So he was on the road for the next 10 to 15 years. So by the time he got back to the East Coast, well, the revolution has started. So he offered his services to our Congress. And there was some congressional senators or congressmen said, we don't want your services. Okay, because he was a British officer. So he goes, all right, if you don't want my services, he went back to the crown. Thus was the creation of the Queen's Rangers under Rogers' control. Unfortunately, he would also go on, that would follow him to his days. He just wanted to get the money back that he used to invest in his Rangers, and it never happened. So he actually ended up a poor, broken man in London, is where he finally died.
It was just never, in my mind, it had peaked too early, like my whole year, and it went downhill from there.
Right. Politics. He got caught up in politics, and unfortunately he talked to the wrong congressman at Congress who said they didn't want another British officer. We don't really need you, where we really did. Because at the time he got back here, the stalemate was going on. We thought we had the British Army contained in Boston and New York, but we really need another British officer for it. Yes, it was a big strategic mistake on our part. Kind of like the same thing would happen with a guy named Benedict Arnold later on in life. They got caught up in politics and that unfortunately. Sir?
Where's the ravine, the location?
It's near Tennessee. It's not on the border of Tennessee today. Just once you go up through South Carolina into the Tennessee, it's considered one of the lower town regions. I can't for the life of me because I just looked it up. I knew the town where it was. I know it's outside of South Carolina. It's in the southern side. It's north of where Fort Loudon is, because that would be the result of the first campaign, where the Cherokee would go down and wipe out everybody at Fort Loudon. So it is actually north of Loudon, Tennessee, is where the official pass is. Sir?
Okay, some sources say that it was a suicide mission that that platoon was on, or was it a standard military operation?
They were called a Forlorn Hope. They really were, because they thought it was, why are you going to send a section? It wasn't the whole, the company. Moultrie had half of it. Marion had the other half. You got to cover each other. Yeah, you're going to get 1,000 Cherokee on top of a ridge. They held the tactical advantage. What no one knew was they only had about 3 or 4 musket balls per man. The only advantage that we had with Montgomery's expedition is they already basically used up most of the Cherokee supply. And the fact that we were intercepting them and were preventing them to trade to get more muskets involved, we didn't realize that the Cherokee warriors only had about 3 or 4 shots on them. And that's why they charged down the hill. They ran out of ammunition. Attrition. But yes, it was a suicide mission.
Was Grant the person that Lafayette contributed to his father's death?
Was that?
Grant. Who did Lafayette contribute his father's death to? Was it, I was thinking it was Grant, but I knew the guy.
Grant would actually die a few years later in Charleston.
Yeah.
Same with Middleton. Middleton would also die in his bed. Well, after that little spat they had in Charleston and the duel and everything else, Montgomery never forgave Grant. And it just seemed, poetic justice that both would die in their beds a couple years later. Not, what you call the best way to go out. But any others?
Eric, what was your opinion of the portrayal of Rogers in the TV series?
Oh, sorry.
Tell us how you really feel.
Unfortunately, as we all know with TV today and movies and everything else, they never portray. Rogers did not have a Scottish accent. Rogers was from Connecticut. So he wasn't a large man like they portrayed in the show. While he was a figure of a man, he wasn't a large man. And he didn't have a Scottish, and no, they don't do him justice.
What was that question?
In the TV show Turn, they have a character portraying Robert Rogers that would help with Queen's Rangers and Andre with his rat tail that no good British officer would ever have, for real. It's TV. And that's what, unfortunately, some of the things that we deal with as historians is we're competing with Hollywood, who really do a horrible job in some cases of showing what the leaders and men are from our period.
You talking about like the Swamp Fox? You mean?
I had to say that Disney did a better job back in the old days when they're singing happy guys like Robin, like Robin Hood, and they're singing Swamp Fox right through. They did a better job than did Turk or the Patriot. I got, oh, sorry. So this is what we deal with. This is why we try to show it right and say, no, it's not what you're seeing.
Eric, did Rogers ever find a Northwest Passage?
No, he never did. Never did. Even though that was a great raid up to St. Francis, where the men almost just about got wiped out, where he did lose actually one of his companies because they got ambushed by the pursuing French. No, he never did find the Northwest Passage.
No.
But you gotta love that uniform, though.
Love the movie.
You gotta love the moon. Any others? Well, ladies and gentlemen,